Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and congratulations to making it all the way down to the summary for graphing a parabola within conic sections. What I'd like to do is just kind of go over, review the process that I wanted to instill out of this course for graphing parabolas, as well as kind of highlight some tips and tricks and some common mistakes that I have kind of found as working through problems on my own, as well as working with students within my class. So basically, when we're given an equation, then we're asked to graph it. Basically, what we want to do is first look at the equation and see which variable is squared, either our x or our y. And based on which variable is going to be squared, we should be able to identify the axis of symmetry. Is the axis of symmetry going to be vertical, or is the axis of symmetry going to be horizontal? Based on that information, we can then identify which type of equation that we're going to be using that's going to help us identify the vertex and the value of p. So we basically have two equations, right? One for a horizontal, one for a vertical axis of symmetry. We identify which equation we need to relate to our given equation. And based on that, based on our equation and our given equation, we can then identify what exactly is the vertex. So then we plot the vertex on our graph, and we also plot in the axis of symmetry on the graph as well, because we know that the focus is going to also, and the vertex will all be on the axis of symmetry. We then use our equation to identify the value of p. And we identify where p is going to be from the vertex. And remember that the parabola always opens up towards your focus, if that's up, down, left, or right, depends on the value of p. And the directrix is going to be that exact same distance. So from the vertex to the focus is p. That exact same distance in the opposite direction will be the distance to our directrix. But remember, directrix is not a point like the focus. The directrix is a line, and it is perpendicular to the axis of symmetry. And we're going to want to make sure we write the coordinate point for the focus, as well as the line, as long as the equation for the line. Now, let's kind of go through some tips and tricks. One of the tips and tricks is write down the general equation. Now, I talked about these general equations, and I think it's so important to write them down. I see so many students, you know, they get used to it, and they say, I'm not going to write them down. I already know what the vertex is and so forth. But if you guys can make sure you write down x minus h squared equals 4p times y minus k, as well as what if it was, that's for x squared. What if the y was squared? Write them down and put them right under the equation so you can quickly say, oh, that's my h, that's my k. Oh, that's my k, that's my h, right? Remember, the h and the k's follow the x and the y's. So a lot of students, if you don't write this down, you'll kind of forget it, and it might come into a common mistake. I didn't write that one down, though. So write down the equation. Once you know that horizontal axis, you know, here is a vertical axis symmetry. Here's the equation I use for a horizontal axis symmetry. Write down the equation so therefore I can identify what everything is. The next thing is draw and label the characteristics on your graph. And this might even be something that your teacher requires. But you know, if they're not asking to write the axis symmetry, what I think is very helpful is drawing in that axis symmetry. Because then I know, oh, if my vertex is on the axis symmetry, remember my focus has to be on the axis symmetry as well. And so if I'm like, let's say I know my axis symmetry is positive, right? Well, if that's vertical, then it would be up and down. But if I have a horizontal axis symmetry and I draw that horizontal axis symmetry, then when I say, oh, it's vertical or it's positive, that means I'm going to make sure I go to the right and not up, which might be a common mistake for some students. So write that in there. Write in axis of symmetry. Write in V, vertex. So you know where everything is at, and that's just going to help you have everything labeled and make sure you're not going to make any of those kind of silly mistakes. Now let's get into common mistakes. Notice that the vertex is h comma k. However, the formula is x opposite of h and y opposite of k, right? So, for instance, if I have x minus 3 squared equals 4p, or let's say just do 12, times y plus 1, my vertex, it says x opposite of h, right? Remember, it's x opposite of h. So therefore, h is equal to 3. And this is y opposite of k. So y opposite of negative 1. So therefore, k is equal to -1. All right, I know it gets a lot of students, but just remember the formulas are x opposite of h, y opposite of k. So always try to rewrite them in that format so you can say, oh, it's opposite, so it's 3, -1. The next thing is understand the difference how to label vertical and horizontal lines. So if we have a vertical line, let's say here's your directrix. 1, 2, 3. If you look at that directrix, the one thing that you know is that on this directrix, the value is x is always going to equal 3. Y can be any equation, right? Y can be any number. It can go infinite up, infinitely down. But that value of x is always going to be 3. So vertical equations is x equals 3, right? Or x equals whatever value you cross on the x-axis. For horizontal, will always be a y equals, right? So for instance, if I had one like here, that'd be y equals -1. Because it's always going to equal -1 wherever it's at. So I see a lot of students switching those around, forgetting which one is which. So make sure you understand that. And the last thing is the value of p. Remember, if I say, here's my equation. This is 4p times x minus h. So 4p times x minus h. Except for now we have the h, and now our p is entangled with this 12. So we write in the equation 12 is equal to 4p. And now we can solve for p. And just remember that p is the distance from the center to the vertex. And if p is positive, then you go up or you go to the right, depending on the axis of symmetry. If it's negative, you're going to go down or to the left, again, depending on the axis of symmetry. But remember that, if p, let's say you go to the right because p is positive. To find the directrix, though, you're still going to go that value of p just in the opposite direction. Okay? So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is your basic summary for graphing a parabola in our unit for conic sections. I hope you enjoyed, and please let me know if you have any other questions. Happy to serve. Thanks.